1, 2. So good morning. We're still a little bit early. Got another 2 minutes. Just let me know if you hear me, so I can at least do a sound test, which I was originally going to do. And I switched from preview to live stream, which is rather amusing. And then I can't really switch it off because otherwise the stream gets a new name and then it completely confuses everyone. So we'll be ready in about 1 minute. So good morning. We're still a little bit early. Got another 2 minutes. Just let me know if you hear me, so I can. Oops, that was a feedback. Okay, I just switched the feedback off. Yes, I can definitely hear myself, so I must be there. Loud and clear. Yes, it is loud and clear. I heard myself loud and clear, and it came right back. That's good. Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to the next episode for DSLR astrophotography. Today we are going to talk about tips for image processing. Last time I showed you in a lot of detail what equipment can be used. This time we're going to jump into Lightroom. Those of you who've used Lightroom before will know that it is an excellent library tool, and it's also in recent years increased the capacity quite a lot for processing image processing. And actually it is it is a very good tool for astrophotography because the workflow is very suitable for astrophotography. So what we're going to talk today is I'm going to go through two images. One image that is very good, and another image that seems to be a little bit lost because I had the wrong settings. So let's try and do some corrections, and I'll take it step by step, and do feel free to participate. If you have any questions, I'm looking at my other screen, so I'm very open. So what we're going to talk about is white balance, which is the most important. Then we were going to go through the Lightroom development menu, look at clarity, saturation, brightness, contrast, vignetting, local corrections, plugins, and so on. So there are quite a number of topics to cover, but I will try and do this in 30 to 45 minutes in order not to overwhelm you. And I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. So I will switch the view straight to Lightroom now. So those of you who have never used Lightroom is a very good library tool. It's probably now the most popular tool. As you know, it comes from Darkroom. Now we're in the Lightroom, and you do all your development in Lightroom. And if you look at the top right, you can see there's a menu. So we're now in the library mode. Then you have a development mode, and you have others. But we're going to concentrate only here on the library and the develop or development mode. So if you have never used Lightroom, what you would do is at the bottom left you can see a tab called Import. You would import your images, and then they would appear as they do now in your library. What is very nice about Lightroom is you have the possibility to use a library filter. So if you use none, which I will do now, if I just use none, you'll get all your images there. You can then select them with metadata, which means according to date, camera, lens, and label, etc. You can also give your images certain preferences. Some images that you would like that are excellent, you could flag them, and so on. And then you could also search for specific text, which many do, that they would label their images with text so that later it would be easier to find them in the jungle of a library. Very well. So I'm going to just scroll down And you can see this is my library from the 1st and 2nd of May. You can see that on the left-hand side. If you look on the left-hand side, you can see there under folders I have, it says Milky Way 1st, 2nd of May. And that's what we're going to concentrate on. And there is one particular image that I would like to process with you. And I'm going to double click on it. It's a rather beautiful image. And if you want to know how I took that, all you press then is the I button for information. And you can see you get some information when it was taken. So this was taken at 2:11 at night on the 2nd of May. You can see the image size. And if you press I again, you can see that it was a 15-second exposure. Taken f1 1.6 with ISO 5000 with a 24mm lens, so a very, very fast lens. That's quite useful. So then if you press I again, it disappears. So that's, if you need that information, very nicely done. By the way, also another useful shortcut in Lightroom is the G key. You switch to grid. If I press G now, I go back to grid, and then I just double click the image and I'm back in see my image enlarge. Okay, so let's start. We are now in the library mode. And if you look on the right hand side, let me see if I can get the arrow in there. Oops, no, that's the wrong arrow. I beg your pardon. That's the wrong arrow. Let's just see where it was. Okay, never mind. If you look on the right hand side, you can see a quick develop window. A quick develop is if you want to just do some simple adjustments for exposures and so on. I never use that. I go straight to the development mode. So I'm now on the top right and I'm pressing on develop. And if I do that, you can see that the whole menu changes. Hi Andre, hi, a bit late from Belgium. No, you haven't missed anything. I started streaming far too early this morning. I hit the wrong button and I couldn't stop streaming. Otherwise, if I stopped streaming, you wouldn't have known where my stream is. So this is this beautiful image that was taken on the 2nd of May at 2 a.m. You can see the Milky Way was very high here, and the colors are coming out rather beautifully. So the question now is, how do we develop it? And I'll just go, what is nice really about Lightroom for astrophotography is on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, you can see there's a picture of a histogram, so it shows you how the image was exposed, and it shows it was very evenly exposed. And then, as you scroll down, you can see what you call treatment, and that is your develop mode. And it does exactly in the right way it should, especially for astrophotography. It starts with temperature. You see the button called temperature. It's got this color there. And there's one thing that you will notice about temperature. It goes from blue to yellow. So usually astrophotography corrections for temperature are taken around, images are usually processed around 3900, 4000 Kelvin. So I'm going to go down with the temperature straight away, and you can see it's getting blue. So I will stay somewhere around 3100 for the moment, okay? What do I do here? No, we don't want this. Sorry, there's something coming up here. Let's just go back. There we go. Make this a proof. I don't know where this button is coming from, so I've never seen it. But anyway, what is also useful below is the tint. I give it a slight tint of +10, slide into the magenta. Okay, so that's the first thing that we've done. We've slightly made it blue. And then all you do is now follow the menu. So you can see the next thing that it says is exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, and so on. So the first thing I would like to do is to adjust the blacks and the whites. The blacks and the whites just means where I clip the image, black being on the very dark side and white on the very light side. So the way I do it is I would point my cursor at the whites, press the Alt key, and if you press the Alt key, you can see your screen turns black, and I just shift it backwards and forwards so I just see something. And that's where I leave my white key. And I do the same for black. I press the Alt key on the PC, and I just slightly move it, and that's actually quite fine. So the blacks and whites seem to be very well, because this picture is actually very well balanced. So we'll leave it at that now. I will just increase my contrast a bit for now, and you can see what happens. Do you see that on the side? You can see that immediately we have vignetting. Okay, vignetting is caused by the lens. It's actually a real phenomena, because the light that travels on the side of the lens does not give the same illumination, the homogeneous illumination as in the center. We call that vignetting. Nothing wrong with the lens, but we can correct that. So before we do any further things, I'm going to now correct the vignetting. I'm going to scroll down all the way. I'm taking as you can see, I'm putting my finger on the on the tab on the right side and scrolling all the way down. And that's quite important. Here it says lens correction. Can you see that? Lens correction. I'm going to click both of these, lens correction, enable profile corrections, and there you see, as soon as I click enable profile corrections, the vignetting has been corrected, which is good. Sometimes you can see at the moment it's grayed out. In this instance, Lightroom immediately recognized my lens and did exactly what it does. By the way, vignetting is never completely corrected, but in this case, I think Lightroom has done an excellent job. So after I've put in the profile correction, I scroll up again, and then we can continue. So the next thing we're going to look at, so I've now increased the contrast, and you can see the vignetting, the darkening on the side is much, much better now. Then you can play with shadows and highlights. I can just bring up the shadows a little bit more to correct the vignetting, and I'll leave it at that now. And now comes some very, very beautiful buttons. One of them is called Clarity. Clarity is marvelous for astronomy. Clarity is a little bit similar to the dehaze function, actually. So what you do is, as soon as you increase the clarity, the picture actually becomes a lot clearer. It does cause a little bit of vignetting, but already the beautiful nebula is coming out very nicely. Another one that is beautiful to use is the Vibrance. You give it's a bit of vibrance. It's different to saturation, by the way. And now I find that the blue is a little bit too high, so I'm going to bring the blue a little bit too, well, we got a little bit too much blue, so you can correct that all the time. I often jump backwards between white balance and whatever I do. White balance, by the way, is some of the probably the singly most difficult thing to know where to be. I have often gone back and restarted my images, because if you start off with the wrong white balance, you just don't know where you are. But the settings that I have, I find quite useful in general. So around 3100 Kelvin and a tint of plus 10, 11, 12 is also what many other astrophotographers. Norman is here. Norman is a very famous image quality is fine, but I'm hearing some sound twice. Oh my goodness. Hang on. You hear the sound twice. Okay, hang on. Norman, thanks for telling me. I'm going to do something now. I'm going to try and correct this. Don't know where this is coming from. I'm going to tell me now. I've moved my screen. Let's hope that this is going to, one second, this is, just give me a second. I'm going to try and correct this. You hear an echo. Sometimes I have strange effects here. So let's see how we can do this. Does anyone else hear an echo? Is the echo still there before I continue? Because that is somewhat of a pity. I'm not sure. I'm just going to wait a bit till I get a response. Sounds good on my end. Okay, that's good. Okay, so you're not getting an echo. It's okay here. Okay, okay, one second. I'm just going to see what I'm seeing right now. Make sure that you're getting the image. I've just moved the screen, so just bear with me 1 second until I see the... Yes, I can see Lightroom. Okay, it seems to be working fine. Very good. It's okay here. So I apologize for that. Sometimes because of the delay, it takes a few minutes to correct things. Okay. So anyway, so we're back in. So welcome, Norman. Norman does a lot on iTelescope, by the way. I've seen him for many years hunting asteroids and so on. Quite incredible energy this man has. So welcome, Norman, to our show. Norman's a real enthusiast. Good. So we're back in Lightroom now. So what you've seen now is I have just corrected, for those of you who just joined, I just corrected the temperature down a little bit into the blue and increased the tint too. Okay, so what's next? All you do now, we've done the lens correction already, which is very useful. That got rid of some of the vignetting. And all we do now is just go down. Oops, sorry, just because I'm working with one screen now. There we go. Is go through the menu. And we've just increased, so I've just got stuck there. We increased the clarity. This is the only disadvantage when I use one screen. All these pop-ups come, which is a bit irritating. We use clarity, vibrance, and saturation. And at the moment, I'm leaving the saturation because I'm using mainly clarity and vibrance. Saturation sometimes tends to oversaturate the image. You have a tone curve, which is very useful. Tone curves, if you have a linear tone curve, that means that all over the darkness and the brightness of the image, you're linearly influencing it. What is very useful in the tone curve is when you scroll down, you can see that it has a point curve called linear. I can usually do a medium contrast, which I'm using now. Medium contrast just increases the contrast a bit, although it does then result in some vignetting. I still find the picture a little bit too blue. This is much, much better. This is for my taste, so I'm going to leave it around 4000 now. Can you see the colors are coming beautifully? You can see how incredibly sensitive the white balance is. I always jump back to the white balance, as you've just seen, because the white balance is incredibly important for balancing the image. You will find a lot of astrophotography is incredibly blue, almost too blue, and that can sometimes cause problems. But you can see that there are a lot of blue and yellow stars and also red stars that are actually getting their colors coming out beautiful. So it's always good to jump back to the white balance. Good. So let's scroll down further. And let's see what else can be done. We don't have any light pollution in this image, which is absolutely wonderful. If you do have light pollution, a way to correct light pollution is with the next tab where you can see colors. If you would take the yellow tab, you can change the yellow, or you can introduce more blue and so on, and you can thereby compensate some of the light pollution, which usually is yellow. But we won't do that in this session. What another important thing is sharpening. A lot of astro images tend to be over sharpened. If you use a very good camera, and this is the case, and the images are very sharp, it would be such a pity to over sharpen the image. So very, very careful with that axe. I'm not going to do anything on sharpening, but my general recommendation if you sharpen is to go up to about 50%. 50 to 70, I'm going to leave it as this now, and then straight away go to the noise reduction of luminance and pull that up to 30%. Okay, that'll give you a balance between sharpening and noise reduction. I'll leave it at that now, but you can see the image still has excellent quality. Okay, so I forgot to tap here. That's what I was missing, sorry. You can see that there was such heavy vignetting, I was wondering why. I forgot to, by switching screens, I must have changed something. So enable profile correction. You can see if I switch that on and off, you can see how the vignetting disappears. So very, very important. That's the most important key, is the white balance and also the lens correction. That's what I find. I always do that first. So now we have quite a usable image, actually. It already looks fine. And for many, you could say, well, that's fine. I'll send this to my friends, or I'll use this for whatever purpose. And if you have good images, they actually do not need very much correction. like in this case. But let's go a step further. I do want to show you something very, very particular. There's some beautiful plugins that they have in Lightroom and also in Photoshop, and in fact they're free, and I find them very, very useful. So what I've done here, and I'm going to go now to Photo. On the top left side there's the Photo tab. I'm going to touch that, and I'm going down to Edit In, and as you can see there's a new menu appearing here, and if you look on the menu you can see here there are analog effects, color effects. What this is oh, please don't spoil the video for others. I checked on, obviously my fault. That's okay, Norman. Well, you know, we actually earlier, Norman, we did have an echo. That's why I was concerned. So in this case, there was no problem with the echo, but I was concerned because it did happen before. So it's don't worry. This is a live broadcast and we all make mistakes. Anyway, NIK software used to be, you used to have to buy it, but it's free from Google. And it's very useful for astrophotography, I find. And I use two different packages here. The first one is called Color Effects Pro 4. And I'm going to go into that now. So as soon as you can do this, by the way, all you do is, and it's very, very easy to install, just install the NIK software for Lightroom. And you get the whole package, you get the analog effects and all the other effects. So I'm going to use Color Effects Pro at the moment. Okay, so I clicked on that, and there comes a new tab on the right, and it asks me, do I want to edit it with Lightroom adjustment? Yes, indeed, I do. Now look, there's also the resolution. Can you see that? I'm going to change the resolution to 300 dpi, because 300 dpi is the resolution that you need for very good printers. If you're going to enlarge it, and let's say you're going to make a very, very beautiful large image, let's take it 60 inches by 40 inches or something, you will need very good resolution. So I always stick to about 300 dpi. Screens have a typical resolution of 90 dpi. So it depends on what you want, but at the moment I'm going to assume that you're going to send this to some printer. So, and then I will click on Edit. And now we have to wait a little bit. It says preparing file for editing. So this takes a little bit of time. It's going to open this in a new package. Okay, and here we are. And as you can see, there are certain presets. Presets are things that they've done. And if you press on one of the presets, you can see this is absolutely ugly. So this is not what we want, of course. But I'm just saying there are many filters here and many useful filters. You can have a lot of fun with them. But I'm going to click on the top one because I have my own recipe. And it's a beautiful recipe that I've done for astrophotography. And if you do ever want that recipe, I am sure I can export it and share it with you. Because as you can see, if you go now to the right-hand side, it's got all these different filters. I've got a graduated filter. By the way, we will discuss the graduated filter. Just remind me of that. The graduated filter we'll discuss in Lightroom. Lightroom has a graduated filter too. A graduated filter just introduces, just as the word says a filter that changes its density across the screen. It then has a detail extractor, and that is one of my favorite ones. I'm going to use it now. So I'm going to open that tab, and as you can see, I'm going to click it, and there comes the detail extractor, and you can immediately see what happens. A lot more stars appear. Now this depends very much on what you're trying to do. So the detail extractor is a little bit like the shadows and highlights, only much, much better. It is a mixture of several settings in both Photoshop or Lightroom that really brings out details. And you can see that some of the stars have come out beautifully, and you can, sorry, I have to enable it. Now I've enabled it. And as you increase the detail extractor, more and more details comes out until you have incredibly many stars, and this may be far too much, but it is, you know, in this image, it may indeed look very beautiful, okay? It depends on the type of image, and again, astro processing is an art, it's not science. If you want to do science, you'll do what Norman does in he may use astrometry and similar tools to look for the magnitude of comets or asteroids or so. That is different. But this is an art. And so it is very much according to your own taste. So if you say, Christian, I don't like what you're doing there, that's perfectly fine. It is your taste. And I completely respect that. But I think that was a little bit too much. So let's leave it at around 10%. The picture is already incredibly detailed. So we can close that tab. I just click on it. And then, oh, you lost the stream. Oh dear. Wait, 1 sec. What happened now? Yes, the stream seems to have lost and I don't understand why. Okay, we are back. We're back. What I did, thank you for reminding me. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this screen back on the other side so that I have better control over this. I think we don't seem to have an echoing issue. So I'm using my other screen again. If you have any problems, by the way, thanks for telling me. Yes, the stream got lost for no apparent reason, but we seem to be back now. Back on. Yes, Ian, we're back on. Thank you for letting me know. Unfortunately, we always have this delay. But I hope, yeah, just let me know, because I saw nothing wrong on my side and I don't understand why the stream was lost, because the broadcast, it said on my side, is okay. Anyway, it is what it is. We're back. Okay, so let's look now at the image in detail. So I have these this recipe for my own for astrophotography. You have other tabs. One of them is called Pro Contrast. I'm going to click it now, and now comes Pro Contrast. And here, this is beautiful because you have much more controls over contrast. You can do what you call dynamic contrast. That's the bottom one. And I can get the colors much more beautiful. There are other ones which I don't use, but you can play with all these color casts and so on, and you can really beautifully enhance your image. The good news is these are all sliders that you can slide up and down, and by sliding them up and down, you can really get incredible results. Okay, and then I have another one which is rather beautiful. It's called Darken or Lighten Center. I won't use it at the moment, but if I click this, you can lighten the center or darken it. It's not necessary in this picture, but sometimes if you have a beautiful galaxy with a center, you may want to dim the brightness of a galaxy, and that's where the darken lighten center really comes in. You have full control of the size of the darkened or lightened center. Another thing that's very useful, they have a white neutralizer. Now again, white balance is very tricky, very tricky. You see, if I add this, I'll get a little bit of blue in here, and I can then adjust these sliders here. As I adjust them, I've got the moment on 35%, but you can really adjust your blue beautifully nicely. I find this a little bit easier to use than the color correction. So if you want to do very good color correction, this is the way to do it. You can play around with neutralizing whites until you get the perfect balance for you. Okay, so I will leave it approximately at this now, and I will also leave it clicked. And that's all. There's another one called Total Contrast, and so on. So you can see I've got all these different levers, and all you have to do is slide them backwards and forwards until you compose the image, and you can unclick them and you can see whether it makes a difference or not. If it doesn't make much difference, don't use it. Okay, but this actually gives a beautiful slightly, you can see the white neutralizer is beautiful. It just gives that little bit of touch of blue into the image, which is really beautiful. So all I do now is I press save, and that's what we're doing now. So it takes a bit of time. This is a huge image, about 40-50 megabytes, so it takes a little bit of time for it to go back. I'm just seeing if my stream is still live. Yes, it is. So everything seems to be fine. And there we are back now, and it's imported it right back into Lightroom. Very beautiful, the interaction between Lightroom and this plugin. And you can see actually this image has become really enhanced from the beginning. Now the beautiful details of the nebula, you can see, you can actually see part of the so-called horse up there in Sagittarius as we zoom in. Come out really, really beautiful now. The colors are coming in very, very nicely. So I think the image is actually looking fine, and we probably could stop there. But I do want to quickly, before we end this, just show you some other possibilities. If you can see where my slider is on, you can also use a graduated filter here, an adjustment brush. An adjustment brush does local adjustments. I won't do it now because we are a bit running out of time, and I want to show you one quick thing what you can do with some images where you have made mistakes during photography. But what is maybe useful very quickly, I'll show you the graduated filter. I'm just going to click on graduated filter. What you do is you pull this across the screen, and you can see you can turn this in any way. So I will graduate it on the Milky Way so that the Milky Way comes out more. And now, don't show this again. I don't know what this is. Make a create proof copy. I haven't had this before. But anyway, what you can now do is you can increase or decrease the exposure, as you can see. So you can make this brighter, for example, and you can make the rest dimmer. But you can see I can it's only taking the effect on the upper part, and it's slowly gradually going all the way down where up to the tree or the bottom of the tree it doesn't have any more effect. So I can finely adjust this, and it's beautiful actually. You can get the contrast exactly right for the graduated filter. Really beautiful tool. By the way, NIK software has a better graduated filter where you can do a lot more. You can turn it into any directions, and it gives you a little bit more control over the way the graduated filter works. So not necessary to use it here, but very useful. Finally, of course, you can then crop the image, and that's very important. When you crop the image and you export it, you have these different aspect ratios, and you can see usually for images, if you keep the same aspect ratio as for photography, it's always 2:3 or 4:6. If you go to movies, you'll take a 16:9 option and so on. So they have all these different crop options, but we're using 300 dpi. So you can crop the image, which I won't do at the moment because actually I like the image as it is. But I've just cropped it for fun. And then what you do finally is you export your image. And there you go to, you can right click on the image actually, and you can say export. And there you can export it, and it gives you all kinds of different options, which I won't go into. And that's it. You export your image and you're ready to go to show it to your friends and so on, which I'm sure you want to do. One last thing now, just to spend a few minutes on what to do with images that may not have turned out the way you wanted during the night. And you can see I have all these dark images here. You see that? Very dark images. What I did there accidentally, and I will show it to you, I'm going to press on one of them, and if I press the I button on here, it can tell you exactly, it was taken at 3:23 a.m. Maybe I was a little bit sleepy, and you can see it's taken at ISO 200. Oh my goodness, ISO 200 is completely underexposed, and that you can see is completely correct, because if you look at the right hand side, you can see that all the histogram is completely on the left side, which means it's on the dark side, completely underexposed. At first I thought there's nothing I can do about this image, but let's see if we can save it. So I'm going to press on develop and go through exactly the same again. So I'm going to now do some basic adjustment, and the first thing I need to do is bring up the exposure. So let's bring up the exposure, and surprisingly enough, you know, we can see a lot coming out here. That's quite good. And then let's try a little bit of highlights. So I'm bringing a little bit of highlights, and then also the shadows. Let's just bring out the shadows. Where are the shadows? There they are. And actually the picture is surprisingly good, So what I'm trying to tell you there is, don't get devastated if you have underexposed something. There's a lot of corrections you can do. It may not be as good as an image that is correctly exposed. But if you look at the histogram on the top right now, you can see how I've pulled all the histogram. I can, by the way, also do this by hand. You can pull the histogram backwards and forwards, and that changes the image too, as you can see. And then you can also go into levels, which you can do in Photoshop. Let's see if we can change the tone curve here also. So what I need here is, actually I need more brightness, so I need to pull this up a little bit. So I will pull it, oops, let me just pull this up a little bit. And as you can see, the image is further getting bright. So you can do a lot of correction here. Quite beautiful, actually. And we can reduce the noise later. So even images that look lost can actually be quite phenomenal. If I zoom in now, you can see there is some noise here. You can see there is some noise, but it is actually not as bad as I thought it would be. Here you can see it's not that bad actually. So we can definitely use this image. So Lightroom is very forgiving. The only thing that you cannot do is if you overexpose images, then you have a real problem, because overexposure cannot be corrected. Only underexposure can be corrected. So I think that is a good introduction. In a later session, if you like this type of thing, we will jump into Photoshop, and I will show you how to work with layers and so on, which certain things you cannot do in Lightroom. Lightroom does a lot of corrections, but if you have some settings, you can use adjustments in Photoshops with layers that are far, far more versatile than what you can do in Lightroom. However, for most images such as these images, Lightroom is completely sufficient. Okay, I think that covers 35 or 40 minutes. I didn't want to make it too long. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was of some use. So if you have any questions, just write to me. It's fairly easy to use, and it is very, very intuitive. Just follow the menu in Lightroom, and you can get to go right through the sequence, and it is the workflow that you can use for astrophotography. Fairly easy. Remember again, the white balance is the most critical slider that you have in Lightroom for astrophotography, and that really determines how your picture is going to look. And don't make the mistake what many others do, is overexpose, because it absolutely looks terrible. By the way, the nice thing is that with NIK software you can also do local enhancements, but I won't go into that right now. You can also do that with the adjustment brush. You can go into the Milky Way, and you can really make the Milky Way pop out. Okay, my friends, that's it for today. So I wish you a lovely Saturday, and next week we'll be remotely controlling telescopes again and jumping into the heavens. I hope to see you very soon again, and yeah, have a very, very nice day. So I will just finally stop the stream now and wish you all the best.